Hey, deep divers. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and, leave us a comment down below. We're diving into some pretty choppy waters today.
Yeah.
It's about Trump.
Former President Trump, yes.
And some pretty wild accusations from his longest-serving chief of staff.
John Kelly.
John Kelly, that's right.
So Kelly, he's a retired Marine general, right?
Yeah.
He was head of Homeland Security before becoming chief of staff. And he's been pretty quiet up to this point.
Yeah.
But he's really making waves now with these new interviews that he's given.
To the New York Times.
The New York Times and the Atlantic.
And the Atlantic, yep. And it's not just, casual chit-chat. He's making some pretty heavy accusations.
Yeah.
He says that Trump repeatedly praised Hitler.
Yeah.
Wants to rule as a dictator.
Yeah.
And get this.
Exhibits all the signs.
Exhibits characteristics of a fascist.
Of a fascist, yeah.
Yeah.
And he uses that term. In the New York Times, he states that Trump certainly falls into the general definition of a fascist, for sure, and that he prefers the dictator approach to government.
And these aren't just like vague criticisms.
Right.
Kelly is backing these up with specific examples and concerns.
Yeah.
He talks about Trump's rhetoric about using the military against internal enemies.
Yes.
Which is a worry that's shared by former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley.
Mark Milley, yeah. And in fact, this fear that Trump was going to use military force against his own citizens is what finally got Kelly to break his silence. He felt that he had a moral obligation to speak out.
So now you're probably thinking, okay, this is big, but is this just hearsay?
Right.
Is this just like a he said, she said?
Yeah.
Well, hold on to your hacks, because Kelly's statements actually line up with similar accusations that were made in Bob Woodward's book, War.
Yes.
Where Milley also labels Trump
A total fascist.
a total fascist, yeah.
So there's a kind of a pattern emerging here.
And there's more. The Atlantic also reports that Trump expressed admiration
For Hitler's generals.
for Hitler's generals.
Saying that he wanted that same kind of unwavering loyalty from his own military leaders.
Yeah, he reportedly said something like, I need generals like Hitler had, totally loyal.
Following every order.
Following every order,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's pretty chilling to hear that level of admiration for a dictator.
It is.
For Hitler like that. And as if that wasn't enough, The Atlantic also reports that Trump disparaged Vietnam veterans,
Yes.
calling them suckers, which adds another layer to this conversation
It does.
about his attitude towards military service and leadership. So we've got multiple sources painting this, troubling picture.
It's troubling, yeah.
Kelly and Milley calling Trump a fascist, reports of him praising Hitler, insulting veterans.
Right.
And all of this is happening just days before his massive rally at Madison Square Garden.
The timing is striking, isn't it? Especially considering the historical significance of Madison Square Garden. I mean, if you think back to 1939, a pro-Nazi rally was held there.
Wow, yeah.
And, I think a lot of people are drawing comparisons to what we're seeing today.
Yeah, I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
You can't.
It's like we're watching a political thriller unfold in real time. Now, Trump, on the other hand, is spinning this rally as a sign of his, enduring popularity. I mean, the thing sold out in 3 hours.
It did.
And he believes that he can win New York,
Right.
a state he hasn't won in decades.
Right.
He attributes this success to issues like illegal immigration and crime, themes that really seem to resonate with his base.
Yeah.
But this time, those themes are playing out against this backdrop of these really explosive accusations
They are.
from John Kelly. He puts this whole new spin on, leadership,
He does.
loyalty,
Absolutely.
and power. And I think we're just scratching the surface here.
I think so, too. There's so much to unpack, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how will these revelations impact the upcoming election? What do they say about Trump's legacy? What does it mean for the future of American politics? It's a lot. We're going to get into all of that and a lot more right after this. Stay with us. So we've laid out some pretty serious accusations against former President Trump, accusations that kind of paint a picture of a leader who admires dictators and disrespects those who serve their country.
It's definitely a lot to process, and I know you're probably wondering, how's all of this going to play out in the upcoming election?
Right.
Will these revelations actually sway voters?
Well, it's really hard to say for sure. I mean, public opinion on Trump is already super divided, right? And it's very likely that this news will only make people dig in deeper to their existing positions.
Right.
His supporters are probably going to just dismiss it as fake news or like a political hit job.
Yeah, and his opponents are likely going to see this as just confirming what they already thought about his leadership.
Exactly. So it's probably not going to change a lot of minds, but it could get both sides fired up, you know? It could have an impact on voter turnout.
Especially, if it's a tight race, a big surge in voters on one side or the other, that could be huge. But aside from how it impacts the election, all of this raises some big questions about Trump's legacy. I mean, how will history look back on him in light of these claims?
It's a really interesting question. I think historians will be trying to figure that out for years to come. Whatever happens with the election, even if there's legal stuff that comes from all this, these allegations are going to be part of his story forever. And you can't ignore the fact that this is coming from someone who was very close to him.
It's not just some random critic or political rival,
Right.
This is John Kelly, a retired Marine general.
Right. Someone who held a position of immense trust.
Yeah, he was right there in the thick of it.
He was.
So his words really do carry some weight.
Absolutely.
They force us to ask ourselves, what kind of behavior and what kind of leadership is okay in American politics?
Yeah.
We've been using this term fascism a lot, and it's a pretty loaded term.
It is.
Can you kind of break that down for us? I mean, what are we really talking about here?
So fascism is usually characterized by things like extreme nationalism, a rejection of democratic norms and processes, this belief that one group is inherently better than others, and a concentration of power in the hands of one charismatic leader.
Okay, so are we saying that Trump ticks all those boxes?
Well, that's what everybody's arguing about right now. Kelly and Milley, based on their firsthand experience, they seem to think he shows a lot of these traits.
Yeah, and those reports that he admired Hitler and wanted his generals to be totally loyal,
Right.
that definitely lends itself to that view.
It does. But, it's important to acknowledge that to use a label like that, it's complicated. There isn't one agreed upon definition of fascism that everybody agrees on.
So while there are parallels and there are some troubling patterns in Trump's behavior, labeling him a fascist, that's a really complicated question, and there's no easy answer.
There isn't.
But I think the very fact that we're having this conversation, that people are seriously debating whether a former U.S. president aligns with fascist ideology, that's pretty unsettling.
It is. And I think it really points to this broader fear that people have, not just in the U.S., but globally, this feeling that democratic norms are being eroded.
Yeah.
And that we're seeing this rise of authoritarian tendencies.
It's like a wake-up call, right?
I think so.
We need to pay attention.
We do.
We need to be informed, and we need to be really active about protecting our democratic institutions. So what's next?
Yeah.
I mean, what are the potential long-term consequences of all this?
Yeah.
What could this mean for the future of American politics?
Yeah, it's a lot to consider. We'll get into all that and more right after this.
Welcome back, Deep Divers. We've been unpacking John Kelly's accusations against former President Trump, looking at what it means for the election and sort of wrestling with what it means for American democracy.
I mean, it's been a real firestorm. I think it's forced all of us to kind of look at the foundation of our political system and ask some hard questions.
Yeah, we're talking about leadership and loyalty and power, and all of that's sort of been, reframed through these accusations of, authoritarian tendencies, admiring dictators,
Yeah.
and disrespect for veterans.
Yeah, and it's unsettling that these accusations are even being made against a former U.S. president.
Yeah.
And then the timing, just days before this big rally at Madison Square Garden.
Oh, yeah, that rally. It's hard to ignore the historical parallels.
Yeah.
Back in 1939, there was a pro-Nazi rally held at Madison Square Garden.
That's a weird echo, isn't it, of
Yeah.
what we're seeing today. It reminds us how quickly hate and division can be exploited.
Especially by someone who's, charismatic, who has a platform and a message that really taps into people's fears.
It does.
And it really underscores, how important it is to pay attention.
We can't be passive about the information that we're taking in.
Yeah, we need to be asking questions and analyzing things, holding our leaders accountable.
Absolutely. This is bigger than Trump, It's about understanding how fragile democratic institutions are and doing what we can to protect them.
So what can we do? I mean, how do we navigate this crazy political landscape and make sure that democracy stays strong?
Well, stay informed. Talk to people who have different perspectives than you.
Yeah.
And really just participate.
Participate in democracy.
Vote.
Yeah.
Be involved in your community.
Speak out.
Speak out against injustice. Hold your elected officials accountable. Democracy is not a spectator sport.
It's a team effort.
It is. It's about remembering that we all want the same thing. A good, fair, democratic society.
Yeah.
Even when we disagree, we've got to find ways to talk to each other to figure out how to bridge the divide.
Work towards that shared goal.
Exactly.
Well said. So deep divers, as we wrap up this deep dive, we'll leave you with this. What does leadership mean to you?
Yeah.
And what kind of leadership do you want to see in the future?
That's a big one.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below for more thought-provoking deep dives. We'll see you next time.